What if there's a fundamental flaw in your premise? Many people here will be familiar with Jordan Peterson, and he's talked about the dominance hierarchy, and that it's flat out wrong to blame that on capitalism. That the structure of the way we're made, the biology of the way we're made, it's dependent. Like there's a dominance hierarchy in all social animals. All social species have that.
Thanks for the question. So I think there's a misunderstanding. So I'm not blaming all hierarchy on capitalism. For sure, there will be hierarchy. There's hierarchy in Norway. There will be hierarchy in Norway even if it moved further left. So there's going to be hierarchy in human relations. Not all hierarchy is problematic. There can be some hierarchies that are great. I mean, I'm the coach of my son's soccer team. That's not problematic, right? They need a hierarchy. So the rich. So there are problematic hierarchies when we live in a democracy. That's a fundamental premise. Maybe you guys don't want to live in a democracy, but I do. And that means political equality. And that is fundamentally incompatible with the Koch brothers, for instance, not to pick on them too much, but they make such easy targets, spending, per the New York Times, over $800 million in the 2016 electoral cycle. That's some problematic dominance right there, and that is due to capitalism, because in Norway, shifted to the left, nobody has $800 million laying around to spend on an election, because you don't have these grotesque excesses of wealth. So yeah, I don't want to oversell socialism. It's not going to be rainbows and unicorns and no hierarchy. There will be all sorts of problems, but we won't have this problem of the rich per se dominating everybody else.
But the rich are part of that dominant hierarchy. So the reason why people work really hard, the reason why they come to school, the reason why they're trying to improve themselves, it's to make a contribution to society. But it's also it's part of this whole biological premise. Like they're peacocking. Part of the intellect is peacocking.
Yeah.
So when you criticize somebody like, say, what's wrong with taxing Bill Gates? Well, it turns out that Bill Gates employs just tens of millions of people. It's impossible to conceive of how many people Bill Gates, a single person, has affected. It's arguably that he's affected the entire world for the better. That's hard to say. Well, why don't we just take away all of his profit? Because some people are corrupt, which I'll get to you. But I mean,
Can I answer this question too?
Sure.
Because I disagree with you too.
Okay. Well.
I want to critique Jordan Peterson.
All right, so I won't go on. What happens if you destroy the very class of people that are producing the means of production? Like he said, they don't just come out of nowhere. It's not just there. It's not a pie that exists and you just seize it and now it's yours. Like people are producing this.
Yeah. So okay. So I take this broadly as an opportunity to talk about incentives to produce under a more egalitarian system. Why would people work if they faced steeper levels of income tax or wealth tax? Well, because they want to be richer than other people, and under socialism, you could still be richer. You wouldn't have the 300-to-1 split between CEO pay and average worker pay. Instead, in a lot of cooperatives, like in the Basque region of Spain, Mondragon cooperatives that are a kind of model for a kind of socialist institution, the highest paid employees make, say, 4 times what the lowest paid employees make. And they're perfectly competitive. But put Mondragon aside, just talk about our own country. As I'm sure you both have heard this statistic, but I mean, back the highest level of the top marginal tax rates used to be much, much higher in the 50s and 60s, indeed up to 90%. Was there an economic calamity? Did the dominant peacock say, I'm not going to show my peacock feathers off anymore? No, because it turns out that what human beings really want is to be better than the next guy. It doesn't matter necessarily how much better in absolute terms, or it doesn't matter how much in absolute terms they have. It doesn't matter to Bill Gates whether he has $15 trillion in his bank account or $1 billion. He just wants to have more than Mark Zuckerberg. And you can have relative inequality under socialism. We're just not going to have this ridiculous absolute inequality where you've got people with trillions, billions of dollars and people starving in the streets. So the big picture point then is socialism is perfectly compatible with allowing some inequality for the sake of incentives.
So I hate this dominance theory. I think it's awful and terrible, and it justifies the worst kind of elements that would be critiqued against, that exist within society. Because it says that we're basically just regular animals. Some of us have this dominance thing, and we're willing to step on other lobsters to get to the top, and to hell with those other lobsters. And it's a zero-sum world, and we're going to destroy the competition in order to get to the top. And it's all about relative. I want to be better than the other guy. I think all of that is bullshit. I don't think any of that is true. We're not lobsters. We're human beings. And as human beings, we have the capacity to reason. We have the capacity to create stuff that doesn't exist before. We don't become wealthy at other people's expense like lobsters do. We actually create wealth that benefits everybody else around us because they all get to trade with us. So we don't rise to the top by stepping on other people like the lobster example. And we're not programmed to step on other lobsters and other human beings to advance. And we're not motivated. I don't believe for one iota Bill Gates looks at the top 400 wealthy and figures out where he is relative and motivated by getting higher up on the top of the list. None of these guys are motivated by that. If you know billionaires, what they're motivated by is the love of producing, the love of creating something, the love of making something beautiful. Yeah, he didn't create the iPhone, which is somewhere over there, because he wanted to be richer than somebody else. He created the iPhone because he was inspired by something beautiful that could change his life and our life. And trade for that. And yes, he wanted to make a lot of money, but the measure of money is not relative to other people. The measure of money is how much did I impact the world? Money is a symbol for how much value I've created. Because how do you become a billionaire? How do you become a billionaire? We talk about this abstraction of people having billions. But how did Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Bezos, these guys become billionaires? By trading with us. Did we win or lose from that trade? Well, why did we enter it? Why did we buy the iPhone? Why do we use Amazon? Because we believe that it makes our lives better. So we enter the trade because we believe we're going to make our lives better. So the only way for them to become billionaires is for millions, no, not millions, billions of us to trade with them in a way that we believe will make our lives better. So the only way for Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and these guys to become billionaires in a free market, we'll talk about the corrupt ones in a minute, I guess, is by making the world a better place for everybody else. By applying their own mind to a problem that exists out there, a problem of human survival, a problem of human production, and coming up with the best idea and then trading with other people, making their lives better in win-win relationships, in trader relationships, voluntary relationships, not relationship that are imposed, not relationship that is zero-sum relationship, not lobster-like relationships. Human beings are different. We're not predetermined by genetics to invent iPhones. It doesn't work that way. There's no way that we're predetermined to invent iPhones. You have to make choices. You have to use your reason. You actually have to think to come up with an iPhone or any product that's out there. We don't, even this building. Animals don't do this. They can't. Right? So billionaires become billionaires by making the world a better place. They do it by creating wealth, not by taking wealth. And the fact that 26 people are richer than 3.5 billion is because 26 people have created, objectively created, more wealth than 3.5 billion, because the fact is the 3.5 billion are barely surviving. All they're doing is they're farming and they're eating what they produce. And I bet you the net worth, by the way, in this room, I'm probably richer than all of you combined, or at least the students combined. I'll take out the adults, because your net worth is negative, because you've got student loans. It doesn't mean I'm rich. It just means I have a positive net worth. So 26 people actually created a lot of wealth. 3.5 billion, sadly, haven't created the wealth yet. If they lived under capitalism, they wouldn't be that poor.
You are certainly enough of a political scientist to know that certain movements spring up in reaction to other movements. The labor movement, for instance, certain social welfare legislation. This did not spring full-blown from somebody's head, out of a vacuum. This was a reaction to certain abuses that were going on. Isn't that true, Ian?
Not always. It actually sprang up from the same source as the abuses. If by abuses you mean the legislation, which originally had been established to help industrialists, which was already a breach of complete free enterprise. If then, in reaction labor leaders get together to initiate legislation to help labor, that is only acting on the same principle, namely all parties agreeing that it is proper for the state to legislate in favor of one economic group or another.
But
what I'm saying is that nobody should have the right, neither employers nor employees, to use state compulsion and force.
But when you
for their own
advocate,
interests.
when you advocate completely unregulated economic life in which every man works for his own profit, you are asking, in a sense, for a devil-take-the-hindmost, dog-eat-dog society, and one of the main reasons for the growth of government controls was to fight the robber barons, to fight laissez-faire, in which the very people whom you admire the most, the hard-headed industrialists, the successful men, perverted the use of their power. Is that not true?
No, it isn't.
Oh.
This country was made not by robber barons, but by independent men, by industrialists who succeeded on sheer ability.
And having,
By
of course they
ability,
succeeded.
I mean without political force, help, or compulsion. But at the same time, there were men, industrialists, who did use government power as a club to help them against competitors. They were the original collectivists. Today, the liberals believe that that same compulsion should be used against the industrialists for the sake of workers. But the basic principle there is, should there be any compulsion? And the regulations are creating robber barons. They are creating capitalists with government help, which is the worst of all economic phenomena.